Hey everybody, this is Modern Refugee, having a little coffee here this morning. And I wanted to do a video for you guys on subsistence and survival, fishing gear, and a little bit of the techniques and stuff. This is in response to a subscriber that asked me specifically to do a video on this. They weren't real familiar with fishing stuff, and they asked me if I would give my 2 cents on it. So that's what this video is about. Now, first of all, I want to separate what is subsistence and survival fishing from sport fishing. Sport fishing is a multi-billion-dollar industry. People spend money on boats and fish finders and electronics and all kinds of gear, but subsistence fishing is a lot smaller as far as the equipment and stuff that you're going to need, and it's a lot cheaper. Most of the stuff that I have here could be used on a boat as far as fishing poles and stuff, but it's more geared toward shore fishing, I guess, and fishing along lakes and streams. The first thing when it comes to fishing is the best bait is live bait, in my opinion. Live bait has caught more fish for me than any other artificial lure. So I have several different ways that I can collect my own live bait because after SHTF, there's going to be no bait shop. You're not going to be able to run down and grab yourself a dozen minnows. So what I have here, the first thing is this guy right here. This is my little trowel on a stick that I carry in my get home bag and I carry when I go out. And I can use this to dig myself some night crawlers or some earthworms, and that's the start of my fishing. Because what you do is this is how I was taught, because my parents did a lot of subsistence fishing when I was very young. When I was 7, 8 years old, you dug a few night crawlers, you went out to the river, and you fished with those night crawlers until you caught a fish. Then you used the eyes out of that fish as the bait for other fish, and that's how you propagated your fishing trip. Another thing with subsistence fishing that I'm going to talk to you guys about, some of the stuff I'm going to mention here, these techniques are illegal, so you're not going to want to do these in a normal world situation. This is going to be more like for survival or a world without rule of law situation where you're trying to catch a fish to make your beans and rice last a little bit longer and taste a little bit better, because everything goes better with a fresh fish, in my opinion. But as far as the survival aspect of it, I've got a small kit here that I've been carrying in my get home bag, and you can make yourself one of these with the stuff that I got in this kit. And this is just a branch that I put some screw eyes into, a couple of nails into to wrap my monofilament line on, and you got a hook and you got a little split shot sinker. Now this is just the most rudimentary fishing pole that you can make yourself. And what I got here in this little survival kit that I'm going to show you here, this is a container that electrical tape comes in, and these make great either bait carriers or to carry a small amount of fishing tackle in. And what I have in this kit is a couple small galvanized nails and a couple of screw eyes. And these screw eyes can be screwed into any green stick that you cut with just your knife, and you put the nails on the back side to hold your fishing line, and you got yourself a bushcraft fishing pole out in the wilderness if you need such a thing. A couple other things that I have in here. I got some line. This is just basic monofilament line. I'm going to talk about line too here in a second, because there are differences in line that I think everybody needs to know about. I got some weights, a couple different styles of weights. Some of them have little brass swivels on top, and some of them are called split shots. And what a split shot is it's a little round piece of lead with a groove in it, and some of them have these little wings on the back, and that's so you can actually pinch them to both open and close them so you can put them on your line. Now, another thing that I have in here is bobbers. I have a small wood bobber in here. I like bobbers. Bobbers can I think make your fishing more effective, especially when you're shore fishing and stuff. You can detect bites much easier if you have some kind of bobber. I know bobbers aren't cool to the super duper fishermen out there, but I've caught a lot of fish on a bobber, so I want to mention and talk about bobbers too a little bit. And this guy right here is called a Russian hook, and a Russian hook is typically used for ice fishing, but a Russian hook is good all year round. That's why I carry one or two of these in my fishing kit as well. And for a couple different reasons is you only need this on your line. This provides your weight, plus it's silver or colored and it's got a little bit of flash, so you can put your bait on here and you're going to get a little bit of a flash when you're jigging this whatever to catch a fish. So Russian hooks are the bomb as far as a survival fishing kit, plus a regular fishing lure. Getting back to fishing when I was a kid, another thing, nowadays everybody fillets a fish, and when I was a kid growing up, my parents, if they caught fish, they didn't fillet fish. They cut the head off, they took the scales off, they took the insides out, they rolled it in a little bit of cornmeal, and they fried it, and you picked the bones out of the fish as you ate, because if you filleted a fish, you wasted meat. So when I was a kid, I picked bones out of fish. I didn't even know there was such a thing as eating fish without bones in it until I was probably 14 years old. Another thing with that is the old timers, my father included, would tell you if you were eating fish like that, you always had a piece of bread with you, and they would take a bite of fish and they would take a bite of bread. And the reason they would do that is if you did happen to get a bone and you swallowed that bone, it'd get stuck in your throat. But if you took it with a bite of bread, that'd go right down and you wouldn't have any problems with bones being stuck in your throat. So the old timers always had bread whenever they fried fish. So that was kind of I guess a little bit of a history into some of this stuff. Getting back to bait, I talked about having a little shovel so you could dig yourself some night crawlers, and I got a couple of other different things here to catch bait, and one of them is a minnow trap. I don't think you can have any type of subsistence fishing kit without having a minnow trap. And what a minnow trap is it's sometimes they're made out of wire. This one here is made out of plastic. I've had this for a long time, and this thing has caught me just dozens and dozens and dozens of minnows over the years. It's caught me frogs, crayfish. And what you do is you're going to take this, you're going to open it, you're going to sprinkle some bread in here, and you're going to close this up. And you're going to put this along your river or your pond or whatever. You're going to put this funnel end in where the fish can swim in, or the crayfish or frogs, whatever, can swim into this, but then they can't get out. And you're going to put this in the water, and you're going to leave a little bit of these air holes sticking out of the top. And that's if you catch an amphibian, so they can still breathe, because the best way to keep your food fresh is to keep it alive. And then there's a little tie off right here where you can go and you can tie this off on any particular branch or root, whatever you happen to have around there that you can use to stake this off with. And if you're going to get into survival fishing and you think you might need to get into subsistence fishing, this right here is going to be worth your weight in gold. And like I said, they come in plastic, and they also come in wire. Wire ones are probably the most popular, but I have an affinity for this one right here. The next thing, what do you do when you catch your minnows so you can go fishing? You're going to need some type of bait bucket. And this is what this guy is right here. This bait bucket is kind of on the shallow side here. You would put your river water or your lake water into this, and then your minnows you catch you would put into this. But minnows aren't going to last very long if they don't have some type of oxygen in the water. So this is something else that people need to have if they're going to get into this subsistence survival fishing thing. They're going to need some type of aerator. Now this runs on D batteries. You put 2 D batteries in here. It's got a little bubble stone on it. What you're going to do is you're going to turn this on with your batteries in it. You're going to drop it in there with your minnows. That oxygen is going to do wonders for keeping those minnows alive, because you might not be able to get minnows every day. And if you got yourself 20 or 30 minnows caught, you got potentially 20 or 30 fish to catch. And that's or catch that you can put up. And another thing, when you get into subsistence fishing, when the fish are biting, now this is going to go against the rules and the game laws and stuff, but in a subsistence situation, you're going to want to catch as many fish as you can. So if you're catching fish, you're going to keep catching fish until you stop catching fish, and then you're going to preserve those fish. And an example of that is like if the salmon are running, you're going to want to be catching as many salmon as you can, and you're going to want to have another crew of people canning those salmon some other place so you can keep going, because when the fish might not bite for another month, so you want to have a way to preserve that fish, and you're going to want to catch all the fish that you can in that situation. Like I said, that goes way against the Department of Natural Resources limits on fish, but in a subsistence world without rule of law situation, that's kind of how you want to run stuff. Another thing that I have here is a seine, and what a seine is it's a net. And I'll show you this here as best I can because this one's all kind of tied up. And what a seine is it's a net. It's going to have a float on the top. If I can flip this over and show you the bottom side of this without hitting anything. And it's going to have lead weights on the bottom. Now this is a two-man operation. You're going to unroll this. This particular seine is 10 feet long. And what you're going to do is one guy's going to stand up on shore, and one guy's going to stand in the water, and you're going to walk with that kind of at an angle, and the weight's going to hold that net down, and the float's going to keep it up to the top. And what you're going to do is you're going to bring that forward, and then you're going to bring them poles in, and you're going to lift them up, and you're going to have fish in the center of that if there's any fish there to catch. That can be used also to catch bait fish or small fish to eat. Does require two people, but it doesn't require any bait. So if the fish aren't in the mood to bite, if you have a seine, you can still get some fish potentially. So I wanted to mention that type of fishing as well. Now I'm going to get into some of the lures and stuff. Like I said before, the best bait is live bait. So you're going to want to have some kind of hooks, and you're going to want to have some kind of sinkers, and then I'm going to talk about bobbers a little bit. This right here is a perch rig, and what a perch rig is it's a couple of beads and a couple of hooks that are crimped on a piece of monofilament that you're going to put a weight on the end, a sinker, and you're going to tie the top up here on your, I got the hook on there. You're going to tie the top up here on this swivel right here, and this is going to sit in the water just like so with the bait on it, and these hooks are going to kind of swivel around just on their own or in the current, whatever it is, and that action right there is going to get the fish to bite. Now perch rigs are kind of a universal fishing setup because you can catch all kinds of stuff. If the fish are there and they're in the mood, you can catch all kinds of stuff on a perch rig. So these are a good item to have in a subsistence or survival fishing kit. Bobbers is another thing that I'm going to talk about. Bobbers are brightly colored little floats that alert you to when a fish is biting. Now, I like bobbers that have bobber stops, and what a bobber stop is this guy right here. This is a little piece of thread that goes over your line. You tighten this down, and it makes a knot on that line. And then you move that up and down on your line, and what that does is that sets the depth where your hook is at. And some fish like to be at a specific depth at a specific time of year. So if you know what depth your fish are biting at, hey, the fish are biting at 8 feet, you can set your bobber stop to 8 feet, and it's going to dangle that bait at 8 feet. And that's why I like bobbers with bobber stops. And typically with a bobber too, you can cast out further, and this bobber is going to kind of just float around out there when you cast out further, and that floating action, whether it be from the current or the wind or whatever, is also going to give you a certain amount of action with your lure or your bait, so makes it more enticing to the fish. And when you're using a bobber, you typically have a certain amount of line that you have out, and line has stretch in it. So if you see this bobber starting to go down, you're going to reel up some of your line. You're going to take that slack up in your line. You're going to get your line taut. And then when that bobber goes down, that's when you're going to set your hook. And that's how you use a bobber. And while I'm on that, I'm going to talk about the line real quick. Monofilament is kind of your standard fishing line. It's a plastic line, looks like this. It's usually some type of either clear or a green or like a smoke color, so it blends in with the water and the fish don't see it. But monofilament has stretch to it. So if you have a lot of line out, like with a bobber, and you go to set your hook, it's got to take up that stretch before the hook can set, and you're going to lose your fish. So monofilament is inexpensive and probably the most common fishing line, but there's some synthetic lines. Well, they're all synthetic, but there's some other lines that are more modern materials that I believe that are better. And one of them is Fireline. I'm going to show you one of my poles here. I'm going to pop it apart so I don't knock stuff around too much. This smoke-colored line that's on here, this is what's called Fireline. And what Fireline is it's a synthetic line, but it doesn't have any stretch to it. So when you go to set that hook, it's right there. That's why I like Fireline. Fireline's another type of fishing line. There's also braided lines. And braided lines are usually made out of some high-tech material, some of it like Kevlar, same stuff they make bulletproof vests out of, Spectre Shield, those kind of things. And but they don't cast well because they got that braid in there, so the line doesn't come off the spool when you cast it. So they're made more for like trolling and whatnot, and I don't recommend them for like this subsistence fishing, because of course trolling, you need something to move you along, so you need a boat and stuff. That's not what I'm really talking about today, and it's very tough, very hard to cut. You're going to need some type of cutting instrument to have in your tackle box as well. I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm going to show you a couple other lures here. Snailed hooks are a hook that's either a hook by itself or a hook that's got some beads or some little spinners on it, and that's to make flash. And that flash attracts your fish because it looks like a wounded fish. So fish are predatory. They're going to go for anything that's an easy meal for them. So snelled hooks are kind of an important thing along with the sinkers and the bobber. If you have a couple of snelled hooks, you have a sinker, and you have a bobber, and you have some line and a pole, you got everything you need to catch a fish. Another type of lure that are fairly common, there's spinners. I don't know if I got a spinner in here right close. There's spinner baits, which are heavier, and these are casted and retrieved. They look something like this. And as a general rule, the larger the bait, the larger the fish you're catching. So if I was going for like northern pike or something, or bass, I'd want a big old gaudy looking lure like this. Spoons look like this, and what a spoon is a stamped piece of metal, and when you cast this out and you reel it back to you, it's going to have a kind of a erratic action that looks again like a wounded bait fish. And spoons are actually really good for fishing as well. And these are kind of what your Rapalas are and storm lures and stuff. And what this is you cast this out, and this big old lip on here is going to, when you start reeling this in, this is going to dive down. And as you reel this is going to kind of work on the bottom and kind of stir stuff up. And it's going to look like a fish that's feeding. It's going to attract attention. And of course, then the bigger fish, they're going to strike at that. So that's a kind of touch and base here on some of those lures. Now, another way to catch fish that I'm going to talk about that's illegal. You don't even want to do this unless it is a world without rule of law situation, and that's snagging. And what snagging is when fish run either in the spring or the fall in rivers, you're going to take a large hook like this. You're going to put some type of weight on it. Now this is a treble hook because it's got 3 different hooks on it. You're going to put a weight on this shank right here. You're going to clip that on there, and you're going to cast that out as far as you can. You're going to let it sink down to the bottom. You're going to reel up the slack, and you're going to jerk that up. Then you're going to let it reel up the slack, let it down. You're going to jerk it up again. And what this is when that river's full of fish and they're all running, you're going to catch this hook on some other part of the fish. They're not going to bite on it, and then you're going to drag it up to the surface. Like I said, this is illegal. You don't want to do this unless it really is a survival or world without rule of law situation. But it doesn't require much. It requires a pole, a treble hook, and a weight. That's all it requires. So I wanted to mention that as well. A couple of things you always want to have with you when you're fishing is some type of pliers or hemostat and some type of cutting utensil. And since most people in their get-home bags and their bug-out bags and stuff, they're going to carry a multi-tool. Most multi-tools will have those on there. But you want something like this needle nose pliers. If you can't afford a multi-tool, these needle nose pliers are typically pretty inexpensive. Two different reasons why you want to have one of these. One is to take the hook out of the fish's mouth, and the other is if you get hooked with a fishing hook. Now, fishing hooks, I'm going to show you here on this treble hook because it's big. See that on there? That's called a barb. When that goes in, that don't come back out so easily because of that bent down piece right there. So if this gets hooked in somebody, what you have to do with this is push this through and then take a wire cutters and cut that off, and then it'll slide out. It's not very pleasant, so I don't recommend anybody do that. But you want to have some type of wire cutters with you, and most needle nose pliers is going to have a wire cutter on there, just like so. So I just wanted to mention some of this stuff to you guys. Like I said, I had a subscriber ask me specifically to talk about some fishing stuff. And like I said, some of the stuff that I mentioned here, like seining and snagging, that's not necessarily legal, and you wouldn't want to do that unless it really was a collapse situation. Then it's probably not going to make so much of a difference. But I wanted people to know about these techniques because these are, effective techniques as well, and touch base on a few of these other things. Oh, before I forget, I'll show you these poles real quick. I forgot all about that. Take this apart again. There's a couple different kinds of fishing reels. There's open face and closed face. I like open face reels. Closed face are kind of the big round plastic or metal looking things with a big push button on the back. I don't like those as well because those are not very durable. They break quite easy. So I prefer more of an open face reel like this. Now these open face reels, I got another one here I'm going to show you, but these open face reels right here are have a mechanical device on here to hold the line when you cast. But as a general rule, if you don't have this on here, your line's going to come down here. You're going to grab it like so. You're going to pick your line up, you're going to flip your bail over, you're going to cast, you're going to close this back over, and then you're going to reel and you're good. But like I said, these have mechanical devices on them here. Another thing I want to show you here, that little spot right there is to wrap your line on so you can take your fishing poles down, like if you're going to put them in a pack or something. Like this one right here is my favorite pack fishing pole because all I got to do is break it down, strap it in a pack somewhere if I'm hiking, whatever. Another thing, these open face reels are easy to maintain because if you use a fishing pole any length of time, you're going to have to do some maintenance on it. So what you do is you unscrew the drag here on the top. What a drag is a drag adjusts the tension on the line while you're fighting a fish so you can not lose that fish. Because what you want to do is you want to tire the fish out, and when he gets tired, that's when you bring him in. But you can see down there kind of what that gear looks like. You want to put a little dab of grease in there from time to time. Any old grease will work, even Vaseline will work. But if you grease and lube these reels, they last a lot longer. They won't wear out on you. And then, of course, the size of your poles. This is an ultralight right here for smaller stuff. And the bigger the fish, you're going to need bigger poles. Like I said, I like the takedown poles because it just makes them easier to transport. But then this is a kind of a larger version of the same thing. Same thing. It's got a place there I can put my line on. I can take the top off here, and I can also lubricate and maintain it. You want to spend a little bit of money on some fishing gear if you want to use it. You think you want to use it for survival. You don't want to buy the $12 fishing combo at the local big box store because they're made to use like 1 or 2 times, set in the corner, maybe use 1 or 2 times more. Something's going to break on them. So you want a decent pole. You probably want to spend, I'd say, $40 to $50 on both a reel. You can buy some pretty decent combos that are maybe $40, $45 that have both a reel and a pole with them. But like I said, I just wanted to mention this stuff here because of that subscriber asking about some of the fishing stuff here. So I told a couple little stories here of my youth on the subsistence fishing and showed you a little bit how to use some of this tackle here. Talked about a couple of no-no techniques that will still work if the world goes completely sideways and you got to feed your family. Like I said, you can make that rice and beans last a lot longer if you have a fresh fish to go along with it every once in a while. So anyway, I appreciate all my subscribers out there. Hope you guys got a little information, a little entertainment out of this video. This is Modern Refugee. You guys have a great day.